It's our penultimate New York fashion discussion, and we're going to be talking about the Proenza Schouler shows. It's a very interesting one to talk about. The show was actually last night, but it was a bit of a grueling time in the UK because it was 1 o'clock, so we are discussing it retrospectively, and I've got a very diverse mix of panellists, from image makers to writers and critics and bloggers, and a stylist, who will introduce themselves. So, starting with Ruth.
Hello, I'm Ruth Hogben and I make fashion films.
Hi, I'm Jack Borkett and I'm a stylist.
Hi, I'm Sasha Wilkins. I'm the founder and editor of LibertyLondonGirl.com.
And I'm Yasmin, so I'm a fashion and retail consultant.
I like that we've had a little wave from some of you. It's very regal there. What have you guys been enjoying from New York so far? What have you seen that you've liked?
I loved the Oscar show because it just felt like Oscar but felt modern at the same time. And the last time I went to an Oscar show in New York, it did feel like close to Ladies Who Lunch. This one didn't so much to me.
What have you been following, Yasmin? What's caught your eye?
I liked Rodarte a lot. I thought it was really strong, and I love the long silhouettes in the print. I thought it was really unusual and quite exceptional. I thought it was the strongest of what I've seen. I haven't seen everything yet, but that's one that stands out for me so far.
And were you impressed by Oscar as well?
I thought, actually, I always quite love Oscar for what Oscar does, and there's something about New York dressing that sort of appeals to me. I guess I like sort of commercial fashion as well. I get that. And I do agree with Sasha. He took it somewhere else, and it was just really beautiful clothes, and you just want to be a girl and wear them, and he does that so well.
Ruth, have you seen anything that you're like, I really want to shoot that, really want to make something with that collection or with that brand?
I think similarly Rodarte, I think was really, really diverse, interesting, all within one collection. There was so many different takes and angles on it, and I think that'd make a very interesting film. I think that one really stood out for me.
I want to talk a little bit about, because people always say that Proenza kind of like revived New York, and they made it feel exciting and young and fresh again. Would you agree with that, Jack? As like a young stylist?
I agree. I kind of think they have something that's kind of not too obvious. I think the references that they have, I think it's kind of a whole melting pot of everything. I think it's not one kind of reference of 70s or 50s. It's kind of, I don't look at anything and think, oh, it's retro in any way. That's kind of why I like it. It's kind of modern and kind of, if I was a girl, I think I would want to dress like that. It's kind of has like, it's masculine and feminine and interesting and different and, not so normal. It's kind of a bit off. It's nice.
They make you think, their clothes, I think.
Yeah.
New York is never exactly the crucible for new talent, is it?
No.
So when you see a brand like Proenza come out, was it 2002 when they graduated, and their success was so quick as well. And it's a bit like Alexander Wang. It does seem that some American designers that go from 0 to 60, they get that Anna Wintour power behind them, and it's like they're rocket propelled up their bottoms.
It's interesting with Proenza because it always feels like with sort of Alexander Wang, who you mentioned, and with people like Jason Wu, it felt like their success was largely part to them having a very strong business brain, which is obviously something that Proenza have, but they've always kind of seemed to cultivate this more of a kind of creative, artistic edge to them. It feels very fresh still.
I think they're probably the most accomplished of all the designers.
Yeah.
But they do that, but also they're cool. And I think that's a really good combination, I mean, the fabrications they use, the construction's really beautiful. It's still for cool girls. Yes, it's masculine and feminine, but as a brand, it is seriously accomplished. And I think they've, they've done really amazing things in a really short amount of time. And they're just serious. They're really serious.
They've always known what they're doing. I would say they've always had a business plan. They've always been laser focused on what they wanted to accomplish.
I'm interested because you mentioned their first collection. I'd like to pick up on a bit on that because Barney's bought that collection, and as you said, it to kind of propel them into the spotlight. Yasmin, I want to ask you a bit about this because you've worked with champion them. What would it take for a retailer to kind of take a punt on a duo who are that young, just starting out?
I think it makes a difference if it's a young American brand in America. That always helps. I think any great British store wants to support new British talent, and so I think that because there were two very gorgeous young American boys who did a really great first collection, really strong. Obviously, people like Barney, the Barney's guys must have met them and thought, okay, they've got their heads screwed on, they know what they're doing, they're tuned in, but really if you're a buyer and you love a collection, a new collection, it really inspires you, and it happens to be homegrown talent, it's kind of a win-win. And I think that, you do, if you love it, you take the punt. It doesn't always work, but in Barney's case, it did work. And,
why do women want to wear it so much? What do you think it is? Do you think it does feel a little bit more, crafty and intelligent?
I mean, it's substantial. They're substantial pieces, Proenza.
And they tailor.
Well made.
I think that there's so much confidence within their actual talent that when you're wearing it, that's how you feel. You have their confidence in their actual design. Their design almost feels scientific. It's so good.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you're wearing it. I think that's how that makes you feel, which I think is a pretty awesome thing to achieve.
Yeah.
Their confidence, brings onto you if you're photographing it. You can feel their confidence.
It's armour.
It's quite strong.
Do you think that's why it's appealed to stylists as well? Because it is shot a lot in really interesting ways, and do you think it is that kind of...
I think when the pieces come, because it's kind of, you can't really look at it and be like, oh, it's like this or that. It's kind of always quite new, and it's, the fabrications that Yasmin said that they use, it's always really interesting. It's always like double bound, and like the shape that it falls in, it is a bit Balenciaga, it is a bit in that Alexander Wang, Nicolas Guesquer kind of interest. When it arrives on set, everyone's always excited to see what it looks like, because it is amazing. Chain mail and embroidery, and it's really well done. And it's tough and hard, and it's not retro in any way, which is always good, I think.
It's so much more sophisticated than Alexander Wang.
Yeah.
So much more.
Yeah, and more detailed too.
Yeah.
I mean, the fabrications, they really are beautiful.
And you were saying before the stream went live, which I thought was interesting, that it doesn't feel with them particularly seasonal. It always feels new and it always feels fresh, but you don't get this sense of a kind of a cycle or anything like that with them. It always feels very organic.
Yeah, I would never really look at it and be like, oh, it's 60s or it's 70s, it was 20s. They'd like take, I think, lots of different things, and it's kind of almost like a mashup of, everything, and it kind of, I don't know, it kind of works, and it kind of, it doesn't really look like, oh, she's a 60s girl.
Which I think that's what's exciting about it. It doesn't ever feel like they're looking back to reference something. It always feels like they're looking forward, which makes them feel so fresh and excited.
Which is very rare, actually.
Yeah.
I've never really thought about Proenza that much. Like today we're talking about Proenza, and it's something I normally do. But I do realise, talking about them, they are actually pretty amazing, and they've done really well. And I think that
Why do you think they've sort of done so well? If you were trying to if you were talking to a young designer, just starting out, and you wanted to use them as a case study and be like, this is what they've done and this is how they did it. What do you think of the...
It's a little hard to say because I don't know exactly how their business is being run. I don't know how much support they've got, how big their team is, how many designers they have on board. They've obviously got a great team of people. I know with Alex Wang, I mean, he moved like he was on the fast track to building a major team, which obviously made that business happen. But yes, I agree with Sasha. They must have had a business plan. Obviously, they made the point to create the bag, create the shoe. I mean, the bag in itself is just phenomenal, right?
And the PS1 has been knocked off,
keeps on
which
going.
is always a sign, isn't it?
Yeah.
Literally, globally.
Just everywhere. I wanted actually to ask about that bag.
Yeah.
It is so iconic to them, but also it's strange for me because I was thinking a bit about how they built their success and how they are very kind of new and young in that sense. You mentioned they just started in 2002, and I was thinking about it in the context of London, and you don't get as many kind of it accessories in the same way. Maybe that's unfair, but I was thinking we haven't seen many of our real young talents that everyone's excited by produce like a bag that is globally as successful as that.
The only person who's done it is actually Victoria Beckham. I don't think...
And that was Katie Hillier anyway.
Exactly. So there hasn't... And that's a bit unfortunate, isn't it? Like Christopher or Roxander or Jonathan, I think all those guys would want to do it, but, I think there are some people that can actually produce that and create that. And, again, Katie Hillier did Victoria's bag and it was spot on, but they really nailed it.
Must be financing, maybe. Those people probably can't put that amount of money into those amount of bags, to make that many bags.
I mean, now that Proenza obviously have that massive injection of venture capital, they're going to continue obviously with that licensing thing. I guess Christopher Kane now we're going to going to see.
There'll be a bag very soon.
Those neon pouches.
They were great.
We saw a lot of those, but they weren't like breakout.
No, and they're not going to go on a sort of mass level, I guess. So, but Christopher, it'd be good to see what he comes out with accessories now that he's going to be a big brand.
Because there's going to be sunglasses and there's going to be everything, isn't there?
But the bag Did that they launched in 2002? When did the bag?
The bag was
2008.
Yeah.
So that bag's been round and still very desirable for quite a long time in the fashion world.
Yeah.
Well, they change up the
change the
size,
size,
they change up
yeah.
the
Colours.
But
my
the
God.
actual staple of what it is, it's still really, really nice, and I still love it, and I'd fall in and out of love so quickly.
It doesn't
And
feel
I
like a
still
fashion
love it.
cliche either. You don't see people wearing it. Oh, God,
Because it's
I've
kind
got
of
it.
it's still quite chilled. It's not
Yeah.
blingy.
Yeah.
I do find it interesting though that if you think about how many of those bags have been produced, I think about all the stores. Yesterday I went to Stoppard and Liberty, and there was big walls of the Proenza bag in like 9 or 10 different colours. It's a lot of bags, but you don't see them everywhere you go. You don't, like, even Mulberry, you see a lot of girls carrying Mulberry. You don't really see a lot of those Proenza bags, but they're out there. And you think it's amazing that there's still a customer who can keep buying into something that you feel like you've seen for so long, but it just keeps on working, like the Balenciaga bag. And I kind of, it baffles me a little bit because I think I see things so, I look at things, I guess, much more intensely, but it just keeps on going. And when you do find that item, it keeps on going.
And I think the great thing about the PS1 is it's worn by fashion people, but I think it's to do with the name that a lot of people can't pronounce Proenza Schouler.
Yeah.
And I think that when you've got when you've got somebody in Selfridges looking for a bag, they'll go for Chanel or Vuitton because they understand those brands and they understand what it means. And I saw a picture of one of the footballers' wives carrying a Celine bag the other day, which does slightly kill the joy. And the Proenza, fortunately, haven't ever been down that route.
Do you think that's maybe why we haven't, because you kind of mentioned the kind of financial reasons behind it, but do you think that's maybe the reason we haven't seen some of the younger London brands doing an accessory that really takes off, because there isn't that kind of, that mass market knowledge about someone like Roxanne or even Christopher Kane? They're, as much as they have an amazing brands, they're still fashion.
I think, sorry, what were you going to say?
It's a huge investment. I think they have the money.
Yeah.
I mean, I've spoken to a lot of those designers, about doing, bags, shoes, and it is, yes, it's investment. I mean, like, I know some of them were mentioning have a very clear vision for what they want to create in a bag. They just haven't got the people to produce it. They haven't got the resources for production. It's just stages. But I think they all want to do it. And these guys, all our guys here, they're all visionaries. They all would know what they want to do.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day they're fashion designers and they're designing clothes. That's what they're being told to work on and focus on.
And keep growing.
They don't really have the luxury to be able to do that, at this stage, I don't think.
If you think that most of our British designers can't even afford to put on a show, if you think of the amount of sponsorship they have just to be able to exist, and how small everyone's studios are here. And I've just been in New York to actually do a story on a young American designer. She has an entire floor for her production. No one's really heard of this designer. The funding, it's just different over
just
there.
bigger. It's just bigger. We're just little,
Even when you go to a successful designer studio over here, it's like one room.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. Do you think? But we've had this kind of discussion quite a lot of times in these New York panels about the different support, and everyone kind of errs on the side of, it's brilliant in London. We've got things like Fashion East and New Gen, and everyone's really well off, and everyone's like really fortunate. But then obviously there is that flip side, where people don't acknowledge that it is a huge struggle for some designers to put on a show. But then New York doesn't seem to have those same support mechanisms, but people do seem, as you mentioned, just...
It's different here. I think we're great with young support, New Gen, Fashion East, but then at a certain point, I think it gets difficult. So you can get nurtured and, at that really young stage for, 4 or 5 seasons. And then actually there's a point where it can go a bit nowhere. And the designers get a bit stuck and they have to grow and they have to get bigger and they need a lot of money to keep funding everything. And I think that we're not all business here. We don't have lots of investors and people and a big market of like the Americans do. And so I think then it can go a bit astray, which is really difficult.
You'll know this as a buyer. Do you think it's because the American department stores have so much influence? People have to end up creating much more commercial collections.
Yeah, and therefore it is more commercial and there is more investment that can be taken. There is more, product to be sold. It's just, there is a real business there. And yes, it is more commercial, hence. So here it can, these great people can come and get a bit stuck.
If you do collaboration over here with a mass market as a brand, you're not going to get the same kind of money that you would have Proval going into Target.
Totally.
So the money you're even getting for the collaboration is just different. With 60 million people here, with 310 million people in America, just the scale is difficult to get your head around. I mean, there are billboards all around New York for the Proval Garang Target collaboration, which dropped on the 10th of February. He's going to get such massive penetration and a lot of money for that.
Yeah, I think what happens there is in America just compared to here is that you can be great, create a brand, and I can get behind it, lucky, and then you can just become really wealthy because you get lots of support. You might get Macy's do a collaboration and this and that, and you get some celebrities, and it becomes business much easier.
But don't you think that that's kind of whether, I know that America's a lot bigger and has a lot more funding and is a lot more business orientated, but don't you think it's to be a successful designer you have to have the talent, but you also have to have the business, and it's not necessarily about where you're living. It's like Christopher Kane is, he's managed to do it, and it's about being clever and talented at the same time and having that equal balance.
It's true. I mean, he's definitely kind of an exception in many ways, and he's always been the one that has been very, very clear and very smart and savvy. And I think a lot of our guys, all of our guys, who I know them all well, are really aware of business. It's just there's just not as much here to support them at that bigger stage, unless it's LVMH or
and there's only
PPR.
one fashion fund prize.
There's only one fashion fund prize, exactly. Exactly.
Just before we sort of take a look at the show, I just want to ask, kind of taking things in a different tack, which is what kind of effect you get when you do have a design duo, because I think that's one thing that's really interesting with Proenza, and I think I wanted to ask you about it, Ruth, because you've worked really closely, with designers, and you've worked in that kind of collaborative experience, and I was wondering what kind of effect you think that has and the benefits of having, two minds rather than one.
When I'm editing, I edit most of the time on my own, but it's so much nicer when you're working with someone that can give you input and is creative and you can trust. It's just another world, but sometimes it's nice to then be able to just actually get all the advice you need from lots of different people and the person you're collaborating, but then just having that solitude time to actually answer questions for yourself about things. But when you really need it, it's so much relief to have someone to be able to talk to. There are projects I've done where I'm left in the wilderness of my own, and it's really, really hard. So I think they're very lucky to work together. But I mean, it's probably just like a relationship. They probably need space within the design as well.
Yeah.
Well, most great designers have got someone behind them.
Yeah.
It's always does seem to be Chris and Tammy Kane.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the obvious British example, but people do seem to go in pairs.
I think you have to, because I think it's so consuming that you constantly need someone there to talk about, and if you can talk about it with the person that you're actually doing the collection with, then it's perfect, because you can constantly just be bouncing ideas back, and the more you think about it, the better it gets. The more you see, the more you learn. It's kind of like a constant evolution probably between the two of them. They can be like, oh, what do you think about that? It's just kind of, it must be, I would prefer it.
Everyone needs a sounding board,
Yeah.
don't they? I mean, I run my
Even
own
when
business,
you-
it's the worst thing. I sit at home all the time, and there's no one to tell me I'm doing something stupid.
Yeah.
Therefore, I do a lot of stupid things.
Even if you're not listening to what they've got to say, you still put it out there, even if you know the answer yourself, just because it's just nice to have someone else there.
Validation.
Yeah.
I mean, Peter Pilotto, there's two of them, Christopher, and they really need each other. Christopher is cut and Peter is print. He doesn't do cut and do, they just do that, and together that combination of cut and print is perfect. They're a really good example of that coming out of London.
And you see it with Medium Kirchhoff as well.
Yeah.
Again, very different skills, but
Exactly.
bouncing together.
The same shoe designers, Nick Kirkwood. I can't remember what his partner's called.
Christopher.
Yeah. Like this, beyond a Castana. I think
He's his crazy sidekick, really. But he's a partner as well. They're great.
It's like photographers and stylists that go out with each other, and it's kind of like, if you've got that like tight bond, it's almost like, two heads are better than one.
Well, should we have a look at what the two heads have done this season? Hope this loads.
it's quite Balenciaga, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's. But we've seen that, rounded shoulder a lot. We were talking the other day just about how flattering that is, and how.
It's beautiful actually, that first look, because and a lot of fashion now, even I'm feeling when I'm wanting to buy some new clothes, I'm not thinking so much now about vibrant or print. I'm thinking just about that cut, the length of the jacket, the length of the arm, the skirt length and how it's. I mean, this is what they're doing, and this feels very relevant.
It's sexy.
We saw Oscar de la Renta. He dropped his hems by about 4 inches.
Yeah.
They were about 2 inches longer than this. Victoria Beckham last Sunday when I was at her show, I'm not saying that necessarily Victoria Beckham is cutting edge of fashion, but actually her fashion was very good, and she had dropped her hemlines too.
Why do you think people are putting that focus on things like cut? Do you think it's because people are buying less, and when they do invest, they want something that's really, really perfect, really beautiful? Do you think the consumer's just a bit more savvy? What do you think it is?
I'm just thinking about myself at the moment, and I didn't realise how I was thinking about this, but I just think, I don't know, I think it feels modern now. This is how modern women dress now. It is, this is it. It's the length, it's the way the skirt fits, it's not necessarily tight-fitted sexy, it's not glammy, it's something else, and I think this is
so many bandage dresses and hooker platforms, and I think we're just done with that look. It's just it's become so reductive to wear a bandage dress, and because that look's been adapted by the masses to such a degree, we're looking for something that's subtle and whispers rather than shouts.
I think this is sort of.
They look amazing.
It's beautiful. This is very much, to me, this is where fashion is right now. This is really spot on.
It's that beat of the music. We are hearing their real music.
Yeah.
I love that beat, that slow beat. It's not trying to be fast or be anything. It's just that slow, steady beat.
Isn't it
so sexy?
It's great to see something like this come out of New York, because it was so many years when you just looked at stuff coming out of New York and we're like, tick department store.
Fitted 50s dresses with a full skirt and a print, it's jammed. It's great. I mean, we could always talk about someone like Celine, I mean, Celine really, when she first produced her first collection for Celine Phoebe, it was all about this. It was about cut. It was very simple. You could call it androgynous, but it really took us somewhere else, and we're still there. We're still there.
But this doesn't feel, we did mention, there's a bit of Balenciaga, there is definitely a bit of Celine's, but it doesn't feel familiar, it just feels relevant, and I think that's a very difficult line to walk.
It always feels new with them. I think if you're a designer and you get to be able to play with new fabrics, I think it's amazing. Like, it's always so interesting to look at it, and we're seeing it now, but it would be a totally different thing when we're looking at the collection.
That chainmail's amazing.
Yeah, this is like a new tweed that they've done, right? Is it tweed? Yeah.
It looks like a tweeded,
it's like a really something tweed with something on it. It looks, it's going to be really expensive. Their clothes can be very expensive.
They're not stinting on
No. And also when you buy them here, they're
that
even more
back is
expensive.
amazing. I love that they've done this.
Yeah, it's just great.
I wonder if they've got a fabric director now.
It's very relevant in terms of how sexy I think it is, in the sense that they've done that midriff, which we are seeing everywhere. You mentioned you saw it in New York, Sasha, and the back, that's the kind of body parts that women want to sort of show off at the moment.
And I'm loving this undone hair as well, that it's just a very kind of, I threw on this amazing piece of armour and I'm going to leave the house, but I don't need to have my hair done and lacquered to my head.
Yeah, it's a bit crackcore.
A bit crackcore, but with a pretty shoe.
Yeah, exactly.
With a pretty, I like the pretty shoe with it. It's not like some hard.
Crackcore, greasy hair. I'll put on my Proenza and very cool.
And a heel. Yeah.
I'm done. Lay me up.
The shoe with that little bow, it's almost kind of quite kitsch to have that. But then
I think it softens it.
It's a nice counterbalance, isn't it?
That's amazing.
But it's also interesting.
Yeah. That's what I meant earlier by scientific. You can look at it and it looks amazing, but when you actually find out how it's made, it's so exciting.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Oh, it's yummy. It says all really yummy.
Yeah, I'm booking in my sex change.
We're starting to shop, not even analyse anymore.
I see, it's interesting how the back is the new erogenous zone, isn't it? It's not ideal for those of us who are slightly more well endowed, unfortunately.
I mean, you can't quite see the fabric there, but it looks like there's something amazing going on. I don't know, but in the piece before, and this is all laser cut. Yeah, I mean,
it feels so confident, this does. I think even more than the last couple of seasons, which has also been amazing.
It's really beautiful. I mean,
colours are great.
that laser cut is amazing.
It's that thing when you see a great show and you realise how bad everything else is.
Yeah.
I think we were actually talking a lot about this yesterday when we were talking about New York, is you kind of, it is when you have that refreshing moment, you're like, wow, this is amazing, that you realise, you know, like there is a lot of stuff to see there that isn't perhaps kind of as fashion as
It's great, you can see all these influences, but you can't see like one particular reference.
No.
There's like nothing there that makes it of one thing.
So beautiful. I mean, it's so soft and it's
so
kind of feminine.
expensive.
Yeah, so it's all just really expensive. Oh my God, that's gorgeous. I mean, it's shown with a flat too, as a long dress.
Yeah.
Their
And that's-
styling's always really intelligent.
Yeah.
Really good.
Well, it looks like how cool girls dress. You know, you
Yeah.
see cool girls wearing like a long dress with the flat shoes and just looking
Yeah.
really great.
But
With
cool,
a
but
polo
very
pants.
accomplished.
Yeah.
Very accomplished and very expensive. So she's wearing a long dress and a flat shoe, but it's like £5,500. And her hair's crack horse, so it's a bit weird.
And it's so nice to see girls who are able to walk in their shoes.
Yeah.
I'm so done with the 5-inch heel and
Yeah.
the wobble wobble.
I think it's done.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
done. It's not right anymore.
No girls want to wear heels anymore.
Yeah, I think or if they
Really?
do, they want to
Wow.
wear something, you know, chunky
But, you know,
that
this
you
is a
can.
sensible heel.
Yeah.
When no, we got to that stage and it was like,
ridiculous.
we're not on like the Westwood catwalk.
Or a pole.
Yeah, which, well, for the weekends it's kind of all right, but maybe looking at it every day.
But I thought it was really
Yeah.
telling when even Victoria Beckham, you know, last season when she did those flats, you know, it did feel just like the complete end to women dressing for anyone other than women and themselves, which is quite nice. You know, that feels like as much as that feels like a collection to make you feel great, it does also feel like a collection so you know that other women would look at you and be like, she looks really good,
She
and they
looks cool.
know that it was Proenza, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite an exciting sort of development in fashion. I think that's what's making something feel so tough and cool and exciting. It's making women feel excited about fashion
Strong.
again. Yeah.
Strong.
Yeah, I think it was totally on the money. Really beautiful.
Is everyone impressed?
I loved it.
I think it was my
It's
favourite
sort
so far.
It says everything you hope a show would say about fashion now.
What do you think? You say everything that a sort of a show can say about fashion now. What do you think the issue is when we have something like in New York to start a season when it's not perhaps the most, you know, exciting or experimental shows? When do you think that kind of the feeling of a season kicks in across? Because I'm always interested in that, because, you know, people start saying, oh, for this season, and then...
Paris.
Do you think it's not till Paris?
Yeah. I don't think you can make any judgment until you've seen Paris. We always used to do the trends and stuff, and it would be like you would look at everything else and then you would actually look at everything when Paris happened.
I suppose you raise an eyebrow at Mark and see what he's thinking.
Yeah.
And then that sort of slightly filters. And
then it always changes though completely from that. You always start on one thing and then you do base it on Mark. And then you look at Alexander Wang, you look at Proenza, Rodarte, and then you kind of Prada, and then Paris, and then that's when you kind of actually make your mind up.
I think Proenza is probably the most in line with Europe, though, with Paris.
Yes.
You know, I think that maybe that can show us, you know, whereas Mark can be just Mark, and you know, amazing, and also Rodarte also do their own thing. It can be very, very unique. But I think Proenza is the most in line with French guys.
That's kind of why I asked, because we had this long discussion when we were talking about Rodarte about, you know, where people should show, and I was thinking, you know, how we were all saying like Proenza is so exciting, it rejuvenated New York, and I was thinking, you know, would we like to see them show in Europe? Because you do say it does feel European, but then is that what makes them unique to see it in a New York context?
Yeah. It's good for America.
They're an American brand.
Yeah.
American girls.
They need it.
Yeah.
They need it.
Well, they do need it,
I like
because
it.
everything else is just business, you know.
So where do you want to see them take their brand next? If you were advising them, Yasmin.
Rodarte.
No,
Proenza.
Yeah.
They're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
I don't know if they really need me. I think, I guess it would probably be retail stores, global retail stores.
Do they have a second line?
No,
Do they?
no.
I probably wouldn't even go second line. I don't know. I think it's more about creating more products in their brand now as a main line. So it is about getting something that isn't going to be £5,000 or buying into something more basic. Their shoes are also really beautiful. I mean, they've got every category. They're just at a very high price point. But I think it would be retail. It would have to be retail as the next step.
Fashion film.
Yeah, I was going to say, what do you do?
Oh, did you see that one they did with Harmony Korine?
I'm not sure.
Oh, it was really good. You should watch it with all these in the collection when they were kind of like schoolgirls with the stockings and the furry things, and it was all like this group of black girls with like baseball bats and kind of like it was really, really amazing. But that's kind of, they've kept it kind of lo-fi in that kind of
they
way.
have kept
It's kind of, you know, they've choose you know, the campaigns are always a bit off. They're never that kind of, you know, blown out luxury. They're kind of like, you know, David Sims. It's more arty. It's more abstracted. And
but that puts the focus on the clothes, doesn't it? You know, that you actually struggle to think of seeing much Proenza branding or much kind of any message that doesn't come through some kind of clothing.
Everything is done really well, I think.
Yeah.
The whole art direction of everything, of the adverts, of the clothes, of the show, of the girls, of the casting, it's very cool. So everyone involved in that, the stylists and the casting and the location and everything around that is very trendy, but not so trendy that people are like sick of it, because I've liked every show that they've done. There hasn't been one that I haven't liked.
And that's a really tough line to walk in. When you become that cool, you do just tip off the edge and everyone's like bored of it now.
Yeah, but you're right, the last however many collections have just been beautiful.
Yeah.
They never compromise, do they? I mean, it's always the most expensive fabrics and the most exquisite tailoring. You never feel like there's been a shortcut in their design process.
I think they're just aiming to be the best in America, and they kind of are right now.
That's a really good note to end on. That's a really decisive comment. It also says you can pre-order stuff now, so we should probably all go.
Oh, great.
Definitely.
Should we give them a round of applause?
Yay!